gonna deal with a tough question today. What do we do when we wake up and our spouse doesn't? And believe me, I really feel for those of you who are in this kind of a relationship. And I feel for you because I was in one like that, because my wife did not wake up right away. And it was a really challenging time. I think it was our lowest time when it comes to our marriage. And we had some challenges before. But that was definitely the hardest thing that we went through together. And I'll be honest, I was not sure that we will last. But we did. And I'm super happy that we did, because today we are happier than ever. And our relationship is happier than we've ever been before. Even as we were considered a very good couple among Jehovah's Witnesses, somebody to look up to. And yet, you know, behind closed doors, there was this pressure. I was putting pressure on my wife to be a certain way so I could look good in the congregation, you know, especially when I was trying to be an elder. You know, I would put pressure on her because the elders talked to me and they said, well, listen, your wife, we love your wife, but, you know, she doesn't answer the meetings. She's low on hours, right? We want to see her, you know, more involved in the congregation and so on and on. So of course I started putting pressure on her, right? We got to be at the meetings early. My wife did not like being at the meetings early. You know, I pushed her to prepare for the meetings. I pushed her to give comments and stuff like that. And she didn't want to do those things. So guess what? It just was creating the tension between us, and it wasn't really that good. So when I woke up, I thought it's gonna be easier to wake her up because she wasn't as active as I was. Plus, all my family were Jehovah's Witnesses. Her family were not. So I thought, no problem, right? She's got less to lose than me. And she's not as active. She barely prepares for the meetings. You know, she was this, what they call single-digit publisher, right? She would never answer at the meetings. She would never read the watchtowers. So I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna show her this problem and that problem and blah, blah, blah. And if I stop going, she'll stop going too. Phew! Was I taken by surprise. I learned something called the backfire effect. Well, backfire effect, if those of you who don't know what that is basically happens when you think that person will wake up when you use logic, but it's more like pouring water on oil that it's being burned. It goes all over the place. So now all of a sudden my wife wants to prepare for the meetings, wants to read the watchtowers, wants to study the Bible, wants to make sure that the kids have minimum 3 answers for Sundays, and we got to be a more example. The reason why you're losing faith because we haven't done enough studying. And I'm like, man, this just went totally the opposite direction. But eventually, and I'm gonna keep the story short, eventually I was able to wake her up. And it was not an easy process. Even after she woke up, she decided to stay in, and years later she decided to leave. And I'm telling you this because I know there's so many people who call me and they ask me, they're like, what do I do? I mean, I woke up, I thought it's gonna be easy with my wife or my husband, and it's the opposite. We're fighting all the time. There's tension at home. We're sleeping in 2 different rooms. I mean, I don't know if this is gonna last. And like, I really feel for you because I know how hard it is when you're hoping that the person you love and care about will be on your side, and all of a sudden you feel like they're your enemy, and whatever you say, they just close their ears, or they ridicule you, or you're fighting over little things. And even if you don't fight over the religion, the tension is there, so you start fighting over little things at home. You know, you left the toothpaste, you know, unclosed, and whatever, right? Just little things. And it really creates that pain on both sides. Don't forget, the pain is on both sides. Sometimes we feel like, oh, you know, we're the ones leaving, we're the ones losing everything, and people are cutting us off. But truthfully, they feel that pain too. They go to the Kingdom Hall maybe without you, and other Jehovah's Witnesses are asking, you know, like, well, how's your husband doing? How's your wife doing? And they feel that. They don't want to admit what's happening. Maybe they're covering some things up. They don't want to admit what is really happening behind the closed doors. They feel ashamed. They feel the pressure. We can understand that. They cannot understand us, but we can understand them, and it's very important. But what happens? Why is it that they're not waking up? And I'll give you, there's only 2 reasons There's literally only two reasons why somebody would stay in the congregation or why somebody would leave the congregation. And two reasons only. It sounds simplistic, but stay with me, I'll explain you. Before we go there, I want you to understand that before you start working on waking up your spouse, you gotta put a little bit of work on yourself. And it was something hard for me to admit, but it is very true. You gotta sit down and work on yourself. You gotta give yourself time. Chances are you're gonna be super emotional and you're gonna say stuff that later on you will regret. I said stuff I regret today. If I had the knowledge that I have today and I went back in time, more than half of the things I said I wouldn't say. But I know it's not easy when you're emotional, when you're there in that moment. You just say things that are on top of your mind, and a lot of stuff could be very damaging for both of you, not just for one person, but for both of you. So remember, give yourself time. I would say definitely reach out for help. I'm very grateful towards people who did help me, even though many people, their marriage fell apart, but I was able to go to them and ask them, well, what did you do wrong? What would you do different? If you went back in time, what wouldn't you say, right? Like, give me some pointers of, even if you don't have a path of what to do, at least tell me what not to do. And I was able to avoid a lot of pitfalls and mistakes because of these people. So I really appreciate those who helped me on my path. I was literally going with my wife to the meeting, to service. After service, I was going to XJW meetups, just take off the tie, look around. If nobody sees you, I would sneak into the restaurant and like, you guys gotta help me out, right? It's kind of funny right now, but back then I remember I was shaking and I was going to the restaurant. I was so scared that somebody will see me. But anyhow, so yeah, that's one. You gotta give yourself time. That's for sure. And then the second thing is you gotta accept the fact that they might never wake up. It is one of the hardest pill to swallow. But you got to sit with yourself. You got to figure that out for yourself. Will you stay with them for the rest of your life if they never wake up, if they remain a Jehovah's Witness? Can you picture your future together 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Now, you might say, well, the way things are going right now, no way in hell. We're constantly fighting. Don't forget that right now, if you're just waking up and you're just having those arguments, this is just the beginning. And that doesn't mean it will stay like this. There are many people who go through that phase of a month or two or 6 or a year of tension and so on. But later on, both sides accept the fact that one person will not come out and the other one will not return. And they set boundaries and they make things work. And they are able to do it. Some people are, some people aren't. But you have to ask yourself, are you able to do it? Are you able to accept them for who they are and keep going? And can you picture yourself being happy? I would say this, always give yourself a best shot. What I mean by this is, imagine, this process of trying to make this marriage work for another 2, 3, 4 years, whatever time that you feel comfortable with. And you give the best shot you can. So you become the best spouse that you can become, okay? Not trying to change them, not arguing, just become yourself, but become the best version of yourself in order to win them, right? And if that doesn't work, if you see that you are super unhappy, that they are very unhappy, that your life is totally miserable for both of you, then maybe, after X amount of time, you sit down and discuss this with them and see if you could be actually happy by not living together, right? Some people give themselves time and see if they can make it work without each other. But like I said, give each other time, give yourself a best shot, try to become the best spouse that you can possibly be, because truthfully, when they see you leaving and they see you miserable and unhappy and angry all the time and critical, or worse, making fun or mocking, they'll never follow your steps. Not a chance. Who wants to follow steps of a person who's miserable. Maybe you were happy as a JW, now you're miserable and constantly criticizing. Who wants to follow that? It would be very difficult, if not impossible. So that's very important. Once you accept this, okay, and I remember when I did, okay, there was literally a moment when me and my wife stopped fighting. We were fighting over this religion thing all the time, right? Back and forth. Because I was like, look what the overlapping generation is all BS. And then, you know, check the 607 and then check the 1914. This doesn't add up. And look what the Bible says. Look what the Watchtower says. And back and forth, back and forth. She pretty much didn't care about any of it. You know, for her, even if the doctrines were wrong, she was very happy to be in the congregation. She loved the people in it, and it was almost impossible to get her out by using logic or using scriptures, using, you know, history, science. None of that mattered. What truly mattered to her was the community that she had. And only after a while I understood this, you know, that for her, that was the main thing. She had the community, especially because I'm the person who works and she's stay-at-home mom. So it was very difficult for a stay-at-home mom who has nothing but home, kids, and the congregation to say, give up the congregation and just stay at home with kids. That is very challenging because we had no life outside. At least I had a business, but for her, it was very difficult to give that up. So she said, I don't care if they're wrong on the doctrines, at least I have my friends. I know who loves me. I love them. I don't want to give that up. There's no point. I'm like, man, this is really challenging. But I tell you, there was one moment when things changed. I would say the energy between us changed. When the tension started different direction. Instead of constantly building up, I literally diffused it. And you might think, well, maybe it was a good day when both of you were happy. No. It happened literally in the middle of an argument. And I tell you right now, when you're fighting with your spouse, you can win their heart the quickest during an argument. The quickest. Not when you bring flowers and roses and everything's gonna be beautiful and they love you when you're charming. No, in the middle of an argument. I'll tell you how to do it, especially for a man. This is what I did. Back and forth arguing, right? She's telling me, oh, you know, this is what you're watching. And I was watching debate between a Christian and an atheist, right? On YouTube. And she came and she's like, oh, now you're going to watch these atheists and people from other religion and this and that. And you're going to feed your mind with all this BS. And what are you going to tell our kids? And you're just destroying the family. You're destroying the kids' future. And you don't, they're just on a rampage. And I started, you know, being angry at the same time, but I'm like, I just remember that this is the moment, the best moment to win somebody's heart is when they're arguing with you, because when they're arguing, they're authentic. Remember what I said. When we are saying yes, sometimes we're telling the truth, sometimes we're saying it because we want to be agreeable. A lot of people say yes to you, but they mean maybe, or I see what I can do. But when people say no to you, they mean it. They own their no's. And somebody says, this is wrong, and they're criticizing you, they're very authentic. They go into their core belief, and they're very authentic. And then that moment, it's the best moment to grab their heart. And that's what I did. I literally looked at my wife's eyes. I grabbed her hand. I said, hon, I love you no matter what religion you're in. If tomorrow you come and you tell me, I want to be a Muslim or a Hindu or a Catholic, I'm going to love you still the same way. Because I love you for who you are, not for what you believe in. And then she was like, quiet. And I just saw her face completely change. And I said, well, I'm really hoping you would do the same to me. And that is a concept that Jehovah's Witnesses don't know, because Jehovah's Witnesses were conditioned to love only those who are Jehovah's Witnesses. And my wife told me straight out. She says, you know, I chose you because you are a Jehovah's Witness, and I was marrying a Jehovah's Witness, and I would never marry you if you were not a Jehovah's Witness. She told me that straight out. But when I told her that I love her for who she is, and I'm giving her that freedom to be whoever she wants, that is what we call unconditional love. The whole energy changed. Everything, like the whole fighting and her being mad at me just kind of disappeared. The pressure was gone. And at the moment she just took back, like, well, all this studying and YouTube videos and everything, you're doing it all for yourself. You're not thinking about us. And I said, well, I know you can't see it right now, but that's exactly what I'm studying so much about this, is because I'm really worried about your well-being and our kids' well-being, because I don't want to mislead either you and the kids and then waste all our life on something that might not be true. But I could be wrong. That's why I'm doing that much studying. And I'm like, But I remember that was the moment when the energy changed from you're my enemy to I can't fight with you because I know you're on my side. Remember this, we can only influence people if they believe that we have their best interests at heart. If you just remember nothing else from this talk or from any videos that I have ever made, just please remember this one thing. We can only influence people who believe that we have their best interests at heart. So the number one thing that you have to do in order to influence, because you can't control and you can't force somebody to believe something. You know that. You've learned that already. I know you know, so I don't have to tell you. But if you want to influence somebody, okay, the very first question is how to convince them that I have their best interests at heart. That it's not for selfish gain. It's not to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. Not because I'm superior and my knowledge is better than yours and you were just brainwashed by Watchtower and now I know the truth about the truth and how smart I am and you know nothing. Because we know that doesn't work. We got to convince them that what you're doing is for their best interest. And once they see that, they actually have to feel it, not just hear it. They have to feel it. Then and only then the influence begins. Very important. Now, I promised you two things that literally convince Jehovah's Witnesses to stay in or to leave. Now, our brain, our subconscious mind, analyzes everything that happens around us. Okay, we have 5 senses and we make a meaning and we make a story of everything that happens around us. And then out of that story, the subconscious mind puts everything into 2 categories. One is called pleasure and the other one is called pain. If an event represents pleasure, then we want more of it. If it represents pain, it will move us away from it. The only reason why a Jehovah's Witness wants to stay in, despite the logic, okay, they could see the wrong doctrines, they could see the illogical things in the teachings, none of that matters because their subconscious mind tells them it is more pleasurable to stay in and it's more painful to leave. The moment that reverses and they say in their mind it is more pleasurable to leave and more painful to stay, they leave. Now, young people, most young people, when they leave, not only young, but I'm saying this because of my own experience with young people. They leave because of pleasure. So they have friends, they want to be like them. Maybe if they fall in love with a person who is outside the congregation, maybe they want to have a certain lifestyle that Jehovah's Witnesses are simply too restrictive for them. Therefore, the pleasure part of the brain says, if you leave, you'll have more fun. You have more pleasure. You have better friends. You have better freedom, and so on. And they follow that. They know there's pain in leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, but they follow the pleasure. The people who were in the religion for a long, long time, most of them, when I talked to them, why they left, they realized that it would be more painful to stay than it was to leave. They were telling me this, and I'm the perfect example of this. we tried to stay, and I tried to stay. And I was going to the meetings, and I was pretending that I understand, that I believe, and my stomach was turning. I couldn't listen. I was just getting more and more mad. I felt like I was losing myself. I felt like I was selling my soul in order to keep the friends and family at peace, but I was not at peace. And at one point, I realized it is more painful to stay than it is to leave. And that's the moment I decided to leave. And it was for me. When I realized, at first, I thought it would be more painful to take the family out. Therefore, I decided to stay. I said, even though I'm experiencing pain on physical level, emotional level, spiritual level, you name it, everything is painful by staying in because I no longer believe it. But at least my wife, is happy to see me there. It's peace at home. Kids, they're very close with people in the congregation, with other kids, with the cousins are the same age like my kids. So they were like this. So I'm like, I'll sacrifice myself for the greater good of my family. That was my first thought. And because of that thought, it was more painful to leave than it was to stay. So I stayed, even though it was painful, right? There's still pain, but it was more painful to leave. Now, at one point, I'm literally sitting and watching something, and I realized that what I'm doing is I'm actually harming my kids and my family more by staying in than if I stay there and pretend. I just thought 5-10 years from now, I'm like, what if my kids 5 years or 10 years from now wake up and they say, Dad, why didn't you take us out of this? Why didn't you tell us? Why were you lying to us? Why were you pretending? We just wasted 10-15 years of our life. Now we're married to a JW who's old, and now we're going to go through the whole thing. I'm like, I just picture that scene in my life, picture that thing in the future, and I'm like, you know what? That's it. That moment decided that it was more painful for me to stay than it was to leave. I'm like, I'm gonna lose my sisters, I'm gonna lose my family, maybe I'll lose my mother. I don't know who I'm gonna lose, but it doesn't matter who I will lose as long as I give my kids and my wife the best shot at living the best life they can without this brainwashing, because I know I will do more harm by staying in. Hope you understand this. The moment you link more pain into staying is the moment you make the decision. That was mine. Now, how am I going to convince my wife? When I realized, okay, I have to create more pleasure for her to leave and put more pain into staying, but I can't do it overnight. This has to be a long process. Then I knew I just have to put a little bit more pleasure every single day to leaving the organization, and a little bit more pain into staying until the scale tips. So a couple of things that I have done is this. I started looking for anybody that can be our friend and that could be my wife's friend that is not a JW, right? Not necessarily ex-JW, but anyone who could be outside that she could get close to, right? Because this way she would have pleasure into being outside, not only with the people in the congregation, but also outside. So that was one. I started creating that social structure that would help her to feel normal, to feel herself, that she would have friends, authentic friends, and hopefully even better friends than in the congregation. Surely enough, with enough time, what happened was the people in the congregation started questioning her of, why are you skipping meetings? Why didn't you go to service? You're not balanced, right? And they started making comments, and some of her really close friends, because they worry about her, but they became really judgmental, and they started, talking to her at first with encouragement, then with, okay, what are you doing? And then with judgment of, you know what, you're not on the right path. She started associating pain into associating with her friends because of the judgment. and then Plesure to the new friends that she had, because there was no judgment, because she could be more authentic. Hope you're getting this. Then the pain, right? So we discussed things like blood. We discussed things like how the Royal Australian Commission was happening, and the cover-ups and the disfellowshipping, how that affects people and destroys families, and so on and on. So sure, this, like I said, it's not overnight. This was years into making. More and more, she realized how damaging the religion is to many people and to many families. And I think what really tipped it over the edge, which today, back then I was actually quite upset, but today I'm actually very thankful. It was one of my sisters, first she cornered me and then she made me to spill the beans of what's truly going on. But then she put my wife, against the wall, and she's like, you got to tell me, what side are you on? Are you in? Are you out? Right? Because my wife went to the convention. I didn't. She took the kids, and they saw each other. They started talking, and my sister was like, what are you doing? Like, you're a hypocrite. I know you don't believe everything. What do you believe now? Do you believe in a governing body that they're the faithful and discreet slave? And she just really pushed her. And my poor wife, she was like, I don't want to discuss this. This is not a place. This is well, the convention was love never fails. Oh, so she's like, well, we're supposed to just love each other, and that's how I see it, right? Like, she didn't want to get in conflict, but my sister just pushed so hard that it literally broke my wife's any association to Plesure when it comes to going to the meetings because of the judgment. So that's what it was for her. At one point, she's like, you know what, forget this. It cost her so much stress into going to the meetings and worrying what people will say and how they will judge her, and how constantly they will try to encourage her with their comments of what she's not doing right, that the scale literally tipped over, right? But it was not easy. Like, literally the scale is like this, right? And then you got to take it like one step at a time until it tips. For some people, it tips over very easy, very quickly. But for some people, it doesn't. And the reason why that is because we have different values. For people whose values are, for example, truth, being authentic, freedom, if those are your top values, even as a Jehovah's Witness, then once you realize that Jehovah's Witnesses are not teaching the truth, then it would be very easy for you to say, you know what, if this is not the truth, I'm out. But if your top values are being in the community, being feeling secure and safe, having people to rely on, the feeling of belonging, if those are your top values, then the fact that it's not true, that the fact that it's that it has holes or misunderstandings or simply lies in the doctrines, they don't matter that much. It will be much harder for these people to leave because they're just not their top values. That's why it's so important to realize why your spouse is in it. Why your spouse is in it. I was there because I believed it was the truth. But my wife was there mostly because of the community. And once I understood the difference, and for me it was easy because once I understood this is wrong, boom, I'm out. Mentally, I'm out. I'm like, if it wasn't for her, I would leave from one day to the next. But for her, it wasn't that easy because I had to replace her values. Her values were the same, right? But I had to find a way where she could feel those values outside the congregation. Because now her needs, her emotional needs, are being met through the congregation. Her need for love and connection, her need for community, for her need for feeling a purpose, her need for feeling acceptance, her need for doing something beyond what she can do herself, right? Like the greater good. All those things I had to replace somewhere else. And I'm like not saying that I was giving it to her on a silver platter, but I contributed, right, to show her that, hey, you know what? That love that Jehovah's Witnesses have, I'm not saying it's bad, but look here, we can show love to more people without judgment, without any restrictions, and guess what? People will be just as appreciative, even more. I just showed her how to upgrade her love, community, purpose, sense of belonging, all those things. If you show an upgrade, people will follow. It's just literally like anything in life. If you see an upgrade, if you see that something's getting better, you don't mind getting a phone with better features. But if I give you a phone with, you know, features from 5 years ago, you'll be like, why? I don't want this. And it's the same thing with everything in our life. Once we see an upgrade, that something is better, our brain links it to pleasure. And since it's pleasure, we want more of it. If it's linked to pain, we want to stay away from it. Jehovah's Witnesses linked very strongly enormous amount of pain into leaving the organization, an enormous amount of pleasure into staying and obeying. Okay? And reversing it, it's very difficult, but it is possible. It is possible because you're watching me and you know it was possible with you. And there's countless examples of people who changed this, and they realize there is more pleasure in being outside. There is more joy, more life, more meaningful life being outside the box. And there's an enormous amount of pain in staying in that box and not being able to be your true authentic self. And maybe many of you were depressed and anxious and you didn't know what to do and who to turn because whatever you did was never good enough, right? And no matter how much effort you put in, you're like, okay, great. I pioneered, I was minister of servant, I was an elder, I was doing this, I was doing that, I was in Bethel service, and I always wanted more and more and more and more. They're like, great job, now do more. And then there's no end to it. So once that thing reverses and you realize, hey, you know what? My life has value, enormous amount of value. And I don't have to constantly report myself to people and what I do, because just when we admit it to ourselves, the entire process of giving the report was because we were judging ourselves. Most of the time, the elders and the whole congregation had no idea how many hours you put on that report. Very few people. The secretary knew. And if you were reaching out for a privilege, then other elders knew. But truthfully, nobody knew how many hours you put in service. But you did. And when you did, you were writing this and you were judging yourself at that moment. Because you're like, I put 8 hours, that's below average. I put 5 hours, it's way below average. And then you're like, oh yeah, about 12. Maybe they will let me carry the microphones now. Oh, I've been a pioneer. 60 hours, 50 hours, 90 hours. Whoa, I'm a spiritual giant now, right? That's why it was done. Not only because they could judge you, but because every month we judged ourselves. We did. I did. And I know most of you did too. No more of that. No more of that. You don't have to worry about that. How many hours you have done. What you could do is look at yourself and think, how can I make a positive impact on other people? And you won't be a piece of paper where you write it down. You look at how other people's life is better because of you, how your wife or your husband's life is better because of you. What is that you're contributing towards new life, like your kids? When you make that impact and you say, you know what, their life is better because you were here, then you start feeling that progress. Then you start feeling, oh, my life has value, and now I see my life being an upgrade to what it was before. And once people see that, then they will want to follow your steps, because they'll see you, first of all, happy, fulfilled, and then they'll see that you're influencing even others for a better good. Hopefully that helped you. If you want more details about what can I do to wake up my spouse or my kids or something, please contact me. Don't hesitate. Just send me a message on the messenger. I'll be happy to help you with whatever knowledge and skills that I have. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.